want to focus on something very unique and very specific in my presentation today. So when we think about leadership, there is sort of an old trope, which is it's all about motivation. Like leadership is about motivation. How do I motivate people to do X, Y, or Z so that we can make it happen, really effectively, and then we accomplish the big goal. And as a leader, I feel good about it. And a lot of the conversation around that is, what do we do externally? How do we build better communications so that we really understand what the expectations are and what the mission is and what the vision is, and there's clarity and reinforcement and feedback on progress? How do we build culture in a way that's positive and constructive and generative and respectful and lead with dignity? And all of those things are super important. What I want to focus on is what I call the inside game of leadership. And what sort of has really captured my curiosity for a lot of years is why we do the things we do. A number of years back, Dan Pink, who's a friend, wrote a book called Drive. And he took a really deep look at motivation. What he learned was that, we tend to have one or two things to try and lead people to a particular outcome. You call it a carrot and a stick, the thing that you're working towards or the thing that you're trying to avoid and you're working away from. And he said it's kind of an old model. For us to lead ourselves, to work really hard towards a particular desired goal or lead others, teams, groups, people, companies, divisions, something a little bit more innate has to happen. We have to figure out what is that innate driver of effort that makes us come alive, that nourishes us with a sense of purpose and meaning and flow and expressed potential, and drops us into a place of possibility and belief that things that maybe you didn't even think were possible actually just might be so. So I have spent years now really diving deep into what are these deeper impulses? What is that innate thing that exists inside all of us, to try and understand how we can harness it, how we can first identify it and then harness it. And I have to tell you, I came to believe something that had you asked me 10, 15 years ago, I probably would have laughed at you if you said this existed. What I came to believe is that we all have a unique imprint for work that makes us come alive. And I call these things your Sparcotypes, your Sparcotypes. Now, what does that actually mean? The Sparcotype is, think of it as two different things bundled together. So first, we have an impulse for effort. And we have this impulse. We don't know where it comes from. A lot of folks have asked me, where do these impulses come from? And my answer is, it could be genetic. It could be behavioral. It could be environmental. It could be some blend of all three. Some people may believe that they're preordained by some sort of larger spiritual body. I'm actually kind of not entirely interested in the answer to that question. But what I have come to believe is they're there. And we've now seen that in more than 500,000 people that have been part of an ongoing study for the last 3 years through an assessment that we developed. And what we've learned is that there exist 10 unique impulses or imprints. And this is an impulse where you just feel like you would work really hard, you invest effort and energy in a particular way for no other reason than the way it makes you feel. Now, you may be really well compensated by this. You may be a part of a team where it is incredibly needed and necessary and valued, or you might just do it because it's the thing you can't not do. You may be a parent expressing this impulse in the context of raising a child, or a companion in the context of keeping somebody company, or any other domain. But these impulses are there. And what we've learned over the years, after deconstructing and deconstructing, is that we have 10 of these impulses. And wrapped around each one of these 10 impulses are a series of preferences, behaviors, and tendencies that tend to show up and form archetypes. So I coined the phrase Sparcotypes because it is the imprint or the archetype for work that sparks you, work that makes you come alive. So when I'm talking about the phrase coming alive, I'm talking about effort that gives you a sense of meaning, like who you are and what you're doing actually matters to you and maybe to the world. A feeling of excitement and energy, like full engagement, a feeling that you are easily lost or absorbed in that flow state where everything feels like you're just completely a part of it. Time fugues. You could blink and maybe it's been a minute, maybe it's been 10 hours. A sense that all of your potential is being expressed fully. There's nothing left behind. And more broadly, you have a stronger sense of purpose in life. But I think it would probably be helpful if I just quickly kind of walked you through these 10 different types. So the first type is what we call the maven, right? The maven. Now, the maven, the primary impulse is all about knowledge acquisition. It's about learning. It's driven by a fierce sense of curiosity or fascination. You live to learn, knowledge acquisition. Now, we call the second Sparcotype the maker. Now, my primary Sparcotype, and that means my strongest impulse for effort, is the maker. The maker is all about making ideas manifest. We create things. So the energy of creation is the fundamental drive. I literally wake up in the morning and I look around and I'm like, what can I make today? So that's the primary impulse of the maker. Now, the third one is the scientist. And the scientist is all about the burning question, the quandary, the puzzle. The fundamental energy of the scientist is figuring things out. It's problem solving. So let's talk about the next one. We call this the essentialist. Now, the essentialist is all about creating clarity and order from chaos. They're the ones who think often in spreadsheets, processes, systems. It's all about looking at sort of like big complex data sets or tons of things or stuff and organizing it, but not just for the purpose of it being organized, but for the purpose of creating a sense of calmness and clarity. So let's talk about the performer. Now, the performer is all about animating and enlivening interactions, moments, and experiences. The next Sparcotype is what we call the warrior. And the energy of the warrior, the impulse of the warrior is to gather and lead. So the warrior brings together a group of people, and they're very often one of those people, by the way. You know, they may be affected by something that they want to see change, or maybe they want to go on a great adventure. And they're one of the people who has this zone. So they bring together a group of people. They kind of bring them all in. They gather them together, and then they step into a leadership position. And they say, okay, here's where we're starting. Here's the mission of where we're going to go. And I am going to lead us there. The energy of a leader is ferocity. So next up, we have what I call the sage. Now, the fundamental impulse of the sage is to instill insight. So the same way that the maven is all about knowledge acquisition, like I'm going to get encyclopedic and bring it all into my head. The sage is all about whatever's in my head, I want it out there. I want to share it with everybody. And most sages, even when they're learning, they're actually learning for the purpose of being a better sharer of knowledge. Next up, we have what I call the advisor. And the advisor is all about guiding people through a process of growth. Very often, the advisor operates in an intimate, trust-based container of safety and respect and dignity. We're getting really close. Final two Sparcotypes here. So the advocate. The advocate is all about championing ideas and ideals. Now, this could be an individual. This could be a community. It could be human beings. It could be the environment. It could be animals, or it could be an idea or a concept. So an advocate may be sitting around a conference room table, and people could be brainstorming and throwing out ideas. And there could be an idea that's really quietly sitting on the side, or maybe somebody told the advocate about their idea beforehand, but they were a very quieter person. They were more introverted. And in a group setting, they weren't comfortable bringing it out and really advocating for it. And the advocate may say, okay, there's this one idea that is super important and super valuable, and we need to center it in the conversation and bring it attention and energy. And that is often an incredibly powerful role. The advocates often become a strong activists. And finally, we bring it home with what I call the nurturer. And the fundamental impulse of the nurturer is all about elevation. It's about giving care and taking care of others. And again, similar to the advisor or similar to the advocate, this may be for an individual, it may be for a small group, it may be animals, it may be the environment. The subject of the nurturing and the elevation, it can be incredibly individual, but they wake up in the morning and there's a fundamental DNA level impulse to nurture, to take care of others, to elevate them for no other reason than the way it makes them feel in the process of doing it and the effect that they actually see on others while they're doing it. So those are the 10 different Sparcotypes that we've talked about. And you may be thinking, well, okay, as I described the different ones, you're like, well, am I that one? Am I that one? Am I that one? Am I that one? And what we've learned through developing an assessment and now having a huge data set that's growing really rapidly by the day is that none of us are just one of these. You know, we tend to be a combination, but we tend to have two really strong impulses sort of like at the top of our spectrum and also on the other side, a very weak one. We call the two ones your primary and your shadow Sparcotype. Your primary is your strongest impulse for effort for no other reason than just the way it makes you feel like you're doing the thing you're here to do. And your shadow, you can either look at as your kind of your runner-up, or very often there's a more nuanced relationship between your shadow and your primary. And that is this: you do the work of your shadow in order to be able to do the work of your primary better. Quick example, I am what I call a maker scientist, maker primary and scientist shadow. Now I'm all about making stuff, but inevitably in the process of creation, I hit a wall, I hit a problem, I need something solved. So I'll sort of drop into my maker or my scientist side of my brain and say, okay, how do I figure this out? How do I release myself from this quandary? How do I go deep into this particular problem? And then as soon as I have what I need to go back to the more generative process of creation, I'll shift back into maker mode. I'm going to let you all know something. So when Brennan came to me and he's like, hey, I said, what's the theme for like the upcoming month? And he's like, focus and discipline. And I'm thinking to myself, that's great because I have none of either. But at the same time, somehow I managed to get a lot of stuff done on any given day. But I started to realize a couple of years back that discipline, that getting astonishing things done, that accomplishing, achieving at the highest level, it was not just an inside game and not just an outside game. It was a blended game. And that so many of us focus on one particular thing. And we end up realizing that we're doing one thing well, we're doing one thing poorly, but we're not getting where we want to go. We don't have the discipline to do it. We don't have the focus to do it. We keep wandering off. And we become really good starters and really terrible finishers. And I know nobody here, of course, I'm talking about myself. When you look at the people who've actually, the world views as having astonishing focus and astonishing discipline and who are able to accomplish incredible things, that there are some commonalities with them. Now, my mind kind of works in frameworks. So I started to really deconstruct a lot of my own experiences, the opportunity that I've had to sit down with hundreds of some of the most accomplished people from literally every domain of life, and then pour into the academic research on everything from goal setting to achievement, to focus, to attention, and things like that, and developed my own framework. And I call it success scaffolding. Now, that scaffolding, think of it as this is a superstructure that you build both around you in your environment, in your relationships, and it's also an infrastructure. It's a structure that you build in your mind, in your body, and they work together to allow you to accomplish astonishing things. They effectively install focus and discipline. And by doing that, they help the likelihood that you're actually going to show up and accomplish amazing things. They help that become your reality. So let's dive into it. We hear these words discipline, we hear the word grit out in the world a lot. I've had the opportunity to sit down in conversation with the primary researcher on grit, Angela Duckworth, a number of times over the years and really go deep into it. And we hear that, it's this thing that people either have or they don't have, similar to the You either have focus or you have discipline or you don't have it. And what we started to realize is that's actually not entirely true at all. That a lot of this stuff is practicable, it's buildable, it's installable. So first one is picture, right? So we want to create a picture of the thing that we want to accomplish or do, or the place we want to go. Large or small, it really doesn't matter. A lot of times we think about that thing we want to accomplish. We kind of keep it spinning in our minds, right? But we never memorialize it in any meaningful way. And the problem is when we never memorialize it, we don't entirely know what we're working towards. We don't know what it looks like, what it feels like, what it'll be like when we're there, what the fundamental qualities of it will be. So we never really truly understand what is the first step in, because we're not clear exactly on what it is that we want to move towards. So one of the first things we want to do is to create a picture of this thing that we want to move towards or accomplish. So for me, if that's a book, so I literally just turned in the next book a couple of weeks ago, for me, that was getting really, really clear on what this book is going to be. What's the theme? What's the big idea? What's the promise? What are the core ideas and the supporting ideas? But I'm also somebody who's hyper visual. I don't know about you, and I'm a maker. I make ideas manifest. That's my Sparcotype or archetype or impulse for work that makes me come alive. So I needed to go a step further and really envision, what does the physical object look like? And that actually helped me sit down and figure out how I'm going to start working on this thing. So when you create that picture in your mind, you want to do two things: be specific and be sensory. Again, this is all in the mind map. So be specific and be sensory. Be as clear and as granular and as specific as you can get. Behavioral psychologist at Stanford, BJ Fogg, calls this crispifying the idea. Make it really crisp, right? Super clear. It's like you're taking a lens on a camera that's out of focus and turning it so everything comes into super clear focus and you have a lot of specificity in what you're doing. And then make it sensory. Give it sound, give it a visual, give it motion, give it scent, if that's what you want. Make it tactile. What does it feel like? Right? So create this picture, make it as much as you can. If you literally have a camera and you have a sense, people do this all the time now. They create boards, whether you call them pin boards or vision boards or whatever it is, to actually get as detailed, as granular, as visual, and as sensory as you can. You want to create a picture which is detailed enough that it makes you start to feel things. And that becomes really important because your brain actually is a little bit like a GPS. Neuroscientist who works out of Harvard and Harvard Medical School professor Srini Pillay says that when you get super clear on this thing that you want to move towards, create, or achieve, that it becomes like this implanted GPS in your brain. Your neurocircuits actually start to work on the steps that will get you there without you even having any understanding of the fact that your brain is now working 24/7 on getting there. Notice I didn't start where most people start, right? Most people start with making a plan. We're going to get to that. But that is also one of the big stumbling points for so many people. First, you want to get clear on where it is you want to go. Now, before I move on to the second piece, I want to answer a question that comes up very often, which is, what if you just don't know? What if you're not entirely clear? Now, I live and work in the world of business and entrepreneurship and startups. So I work with a lot of founders. And a lot of times when a founder is trying to start something, whether it's a private practice or a platform or business, they have some sense of what they wanted to do and the problem they wanted to solve, but they don't know the details yet. And they kind of know that that's going to unfold over time. So if the thing that you're thinking about accomplishing, if the thing that you want to harness focus and discipline towards is not really super easy to make specific and sensory at this moment in time, zoom the lens out just a touch. And what you want to do is think about, what are the essential qualities of that thing, right? So I know if I'm looking to launch a company, I kind of know the qualities. I know what culture I want, what people I want. I can get a lot more specific in the context of qualities. And while that may not be as effective, that gets me way past just having some sort of nebulous idea spinning in my head. And then be sure to memorialize this. right? Either write it out, like literally like take a page and write out what this picture is, take pictures, draw it, film videos, whatever you need to do to make it real to you. That's what we want to do. The topic for today and really for the month, advanced mindset and resilience. The way that I think about resilience when I think about it is the ability to move through moments and sometimes entire seasons of adversity, so that the experience of moving through it, the experience of interacting with it, the experience of dancing with it is something where you can access the greatest amount of equanimity, of peace and ease during the experience. I was thinking about what's the strongest experience that I've had where I've had to be incredibly resilient. And I kind of was focusing on business. So we actually run two companies, and one of them is a media company. And we produce this flagship podcast called Good Life Project. We've been doing it for years. We actually started as a video show, filming on location with a crew and cameras. And we transitioned 2 years into that to become pure audio, just a podcast. And we air twice a week. So we have a very aggressive production schedule. I made a commitment very early on that we were not only going to create the most extraordinary production values that we could, but also the most intimate, the most real, the most open, honest, and revelatory conversations that we could do. We built a place to actually host this where I controlled the entire environment. I would invite people in and they would come in and we would close the door behind them. And we'd sit in these two really comfy chairs with this super plush rug in a pretty intimate setting and with headphones on so we could hear each other in our ears and we could see each other. We're looking at each other. That in-person format, for me, it was sacred. So we're 6 years into this format. We're known for hosting these intimate in-person things where you can literally hear the occasional siren coming through the studio, like the 4 layers of acoustic glass. And my belief, I have this deeply held belief that we cannot host the quality and the depth of conversation that I am comfortable producing if we have to do it remotely. And then all of a sudden, a year ago hits. We had a quick meeting with the team and said, okay, we can't do this anymore. We can't, this thing that we've held so sacred, our entire business, our pride, my ego, the brand was built around the extraordinary quality of the conversations and the production value of being in a studio, being up close with these really super high quality microphones and no echo and things like that. We had to make a decision because we were faced with mass disruption. And remember last year, everything kind of hit New York very early in the year. And New York just started to shut down everything. It was like the dominoes are falling in everything. Within a matter of days, the entire city is just shutting down. And we're thinking to ourselves, okay, so if we stick to this ethos, we're going to go on hiatus, or we're literally going to shut down the company and the community and the podcast. And we had other shows that we had started to work on developing as well. So the choice was, we didn't want this level of disruption. We didn't ask for it. We didn't see it coming. Nobody saw it coming. But here it is. This is adversity on the extreme level where it effectively had the potential to take out my entire business. But also, it made me kind of rethink, what are the assumptions? What are the assumptions that have gotten me to this place? And how can I change those assumptions? How can I respond to it? How can I see the possibility side of what's happening here and not just feel like I'm being pummeled all day, every day by the disruption, by the adversity? Because that's the heartbeat of resilience, is being able to see the other story in the face of adversity. So what we did was start to test, and we started to say, okay, so there's a certain amount of forgiveness in the world right now. We all know that we're doing the best that we can. Why don't we take this window of time? Let's experiment. How close can we get to what we were able to do in person in the studio? And what we found was we started testing all these different platforms, and we're like, like sort of like the Goldilocks story, not quite, not quite, not quite. And then eventually we started to land on platforms for different things that were like, you know what? It's not the same as being in the studio, but it's good enough for now. So then we said, okay, how do we take this and try and make it even better? And we started to test a wide range of microphones that were shippable. And we started shipping microphones around to all of our guests. So if anybody didn't have the quality of recording equipment that we felt was important, we would literally buy it for them. And we still do that to this day. We realized that there was a lot that we could do in post-production. So we up-leveled our team. Our editor went into and trained to learn a lot more about post-production. We brought on a high-level sound engineer to fix all sorts of things. And that added a lot to the back end of what we're doing. But what we started to learn over time is that this assumption that I had about the only way that things are going to be okay is if we do it this way. When adversity dropped into my lap, when it sort of exploded into the world and into my world and my business, and I couldn't do it that way anymore. I literally, all the assumptions that I made and all the choices that were based on those assumptions were blown up. I could not keep making those choices. I can either shut it down and cave to adversity, or I can say, okay, so what is the possibility story here? How do we dance with this? How do we move through it? And what we start to realize is this now opens the entire universe to us. So now, if there's a guest in a different country, or if there's a guest across the country, or there's a guest in the Southern Hemisphere, we can now coordinate that. So all of a sudden, we're able to sit down with people who just never would have been able to be on the podcast and in conversation with me. What I discovered was, because so many people are actually doing it from their homes, that the home created its own sense of virtual intimacy or remote intimacy. They were intimate in their space. I was intimate in my space. And that intimacy, even if it was 1,000 miles apart, it bridged the chasm to create this sort of, like virtual ethereal container of safety and sanctity. And that really surprised me. And now, as we sort of like step into what I would consider, emerging our way slowly into a new season, now we're starting to actually think about, well, where do we go from here? When in fact it is safe to be back in a room, back in a studio together, are we going to automatically do that? And my honest answer right now, because we've been so convinced and so blown away and so surprised by dropping our assumptions, by simply kind of surrendering to the truth of the circumstance, and by actively seeking out the possibility story, and then trying to increase the volume of possibility as much as humanly possible, we've been really dramatically surprised, because there are some really powerful benefits to not doing it. So not only do I feel like we have sort of bounced back to the place that we were before, but I think we've balanced forward to a certain extent to increased possibility. We may very well end up doing a hybrid model where we film and we record and we do the audio in studio, and then a whole bunch of other things we do remotely, because now we know how to do that. And because now people we want to speak to and people who want to speak to us, we can bring ourselves together in the virtual space in a way that either never would have happened face to face, or it would have taken months or years to pull the whole thing off. So I think the meta idea, when I think about adversity and resilience, it's sort of like the key for me is really, it's the notion of what I call the possibility story, right? So, and I call it the law of possibility. Is this a proven law? No, but it sounds kind of fun. For every disruption, there is an equal and opposite possibility. So our job in moments of adversity is to ask the question, what is the possibility story? So excited to dive into this topic for so many different reasons. It's kind of like the center of life in my mind. One of the longest running studies on human flourishing, the Harvard study, also known as shorthand as the Grant study, basically tracked a whole bunch of people. It was actually done on men, and from what I understand, they're now a second wave of that study where it's going to be multi-gender, which is pretty amazing. But what they did was they literally tracked people over a period of generations in their lives and measured almost every single thing that was going on to try and determine what makes for a good life, what makes people happy, what makes them flourish, what gives them a sense of meaning. And the longest running curator of that study was once asked, of all the different things that you have looked at, of the biometrics, the physiology, all like geography, career, all these different things, is there any one thing that really stood out as being sort of determinative of a life well lived? And his answer was love, full stop. And going deeper, it's the quality and depth of the relationships that we form that really make life extraordinary on so many levels. When I think about the work that I've been doing for probably about 2 decades now, and Brendan's been doing, so many of us that have this amazing privilege of being here with you, it's really looking at these big questions. And no matter where you look, this idea of relationships and how we relate to other people, it just keeps coming back to the center of the stage. And with good reason. It's that important. There's a ton of data that now shows that, but we don't need data. We know that intuitively. And if we had questioned that in any way, shape, or form, this last 16 months have pretty much reminded people how important other people are to them and their lives, to their happiness, to their sense of flourishing, their sense of connectedness. It's been a bit of a relationship cauldron to a certain extent. And I'm not just talking about intimate partners or life partners. I'm talking about on every possible level, whether it's work relationships, professional relationships, friendship relationships, enemy relationships, compassionate relationships, companionate relationships, romantic relationships. Everything has sort of been put under the microscope recently, and we've been tested in really big ways. I know it's been interesting for me. So I have worked from home for many years now, and I actually work full-time with my wife, Stephanie. And we play different roles in our company, and our entire team is distributed literally around the country and even internationally. So we've had to learn how to work in these kind of weird different modes that a lot of the world has been forced to switch to in the last year and a half or so. And we kind of figured, okay, so this is going to take some figuring out, but we kind of have it dialed in already. We didn't really know. There was a lot of work to do. And then we're working at home. And it also is very different. We spent the better part of last year in New York City, which was a tough place to be for the first 3/4 of the year. And then our daughter, who was in college, ended up having to leave early and come home. And we found ourselves, the three of us, married with my wife and with my daughter there, working full time with my wife in the apartment, with my daughter sort of like exiled from school and home and then doing school remotely. And us in a situation, especially the early part of last year, where none of us felt like we could leave home. None of us could see anybody else. We couldn't interact with other human beings. So it was a very different experience that we really were not prepared to. But at the same time, as challenging as it was, as much as it brought up the powerful invitation to revisit how we interact with each other, how we relate to each other, how we can continue to cohabit a finite space in a way that feels both sacred and respectful, while being nourishing and alive and vibrant, and also allowing us to have our own places to go to. It's been a really interesting test. I used that word cauldron before, and I think a lot of us have felt that. What's kind of funny is we ended up moving out to Colorado in September of last year, where we were for 9 months. And then because we wanted to see some friends and come back for a little bit, the three of us just wedged ourselves into a car. We essentially took everything that we owned, got rid of a whole bunch of stuff, and sort of sealed ourselves into a Subaru with a cargo box up on top, and literally just drove over a period of a week, the 2,000 or so miles cross country back where we're actually kind of hanging out right now in a little cottage you can probably see behind me in Western Massachusetts. And that drive was sort of the, it was the final test for us. Could we actually, having figured out how to be together in like this confined space in a confined world, could we then spend a week together in a car, literally wedged into a place because there was no room to move in this car anywhere, and be okay? And we were. It actually was kind of a fun, powerful experience. And it's reminded me so much about the important parts of life and the important parts of how to be with other people in a way that no matter what the circumstances happening around you bring you, the interrelational part of what's happening still stays healthy. It still stays constructive and generative. So over the years, I have had an astonishing opportunity to sit down with so many leading voices, luminaries, primary researchers in all different aspects of relationships, from love to friendship to collegial relationships, and learn from them. I've also studied a mountain of academic research because I'm a little bit of a geek like that. And I thought a fun thing to do, and hopefully valuable thing to do as we spend our time together today, was to share a little bit of things that have come to me, my own insights. But I also wanted to take a couple of the really key lessons that have been shared with me by guests on the Good Life Project podcast over nearly a decade now, that I have found to be utterly transformative on a relationship topic. So I'm going to talk about three different things and a couple of different people here. And we'll start out with something called bids. So the power of bids. Now, the notion of bids was introduced to me originally by a couple who I met, John and Julie Gottman. Now, John and Julie have been together for a very long time in their own professional and personal relationship. And they've ended up in the beginning, John was primarily a researcher. He was an academic, taught at a university, ran a lab, and he researched love. Julie was a clinical psychologist who focused intensely on relationships too. And they used to have these really fun debates with each other because John would say, this is what's happening in the laboratory. We know it. Here's the data. And Julie would say, but dude, this is what's happening in my clinical practice. Like when I'm sitting in front of people face to face, actually talking with them, it's a totally different experience. It's fun to be in a room, to watch them sort of like interact and trade with each other, like tossing the baton between each other, and see how they built this beautiful relationship. But they introduced and they noticed this fascinating thing, which is that on any given moment in time, what happens with two people in a room, whether it's romantic couples, whether it's friends, whether it's colleagues, is pretty much all day, every day, we are in some way really big and overt, or kind of more subtle and nuanced. We are bidding for the attention and affection of other people. And what John and Julie did in this sort of like long-term longitudinal research was they looked at couples, newly married couples, and they would just sort of like watch their interactions in a room. And they were able to predict over a long period of time who was going to actually stay together and who was not. And in fact, they classified these partnerships into two different things that they sort of loosely termed the masters and the disasters. The people who are very likely to stay together and have, like strong relationships, the people who are very likely to end up apart. And started asking themselves, well, what's going on here? Like, can we actually identify something that's fairly universal across these two groups of people that would be predicted on a pretty consistent basis of success in relationships and failure? Then what they realized was there was something much bigger happening on a meta level. And it was all about these bids for attention and affection. What they realized was that as we make bids for attention and affection all day, every day, there are generally three responses to those bids. One is what they call turning towards. So let's say I'm sitting on the couch and I'm with my wife, Stephanie. And I'm kind of sitting there and I'm like, I have this shoulders is really bothering me. It's just really tight, right? That's very likely me bidding for a little bit of attention. And maybe I don't want to just outright say it, but things like this happen all the time, or maybe I'm opening the dishwasher and there's something, like I could use a little bit of help. Maybe I walk in, and so all the time we're sort of like making these bids for other people's attention and affection and help. Turning towards that would be something like would be acknowledging the bid and then in some way responding positively to it. So I'm turning towards the bid. Oh, yes. Like I see that's going on. Like if Stephanie's, got a headache, let me just help rub your temples. So turning towards is acknowledging the bid and then turning towards it in a constructive and positive way. That's the first response to bids for attention and affection. Second is turning away, which means you're kind of like, whether you see it or not, you choose not to acknowledge it and not to respond to it in a constructive or positive way. The third is what they categorized as turning against. And this is not only not being helpful or not giving the person the attention or affection they want, but actively being aggressive in your response to it. So if that would be, if my shoulder hurts, or I'm a little tired, I'm a little headachy, or, that would be not Stephanie like reaching and saying, oh, like, let me see if I can help work it out a little bit, or ignoring it, but it'd be actively saying, well, it serves you right because you're being a real idiot lately and you deserve this. So there are these three different things, right? So there's the bid for attention and affection, and then the three responses: turning towards, turning away, and turning against. Advanced wellness, right, in work and life. This has been a part of my fascination, my exploration, my kind of reason for being for my entire adult life. As a kid, I actually trained until I was probably 18 year round as a competitive gymnast, and absolutely destroyed my body. And now at 55, like I'm learning that, there's this lifelong commitment that we all make to feeling good. And sometimes when we go really hard early in life, because we're invincible, we have that mindset where we're like, we can do anything. And yes, it may hurt, or I may be injuring myself, but I'll get over it. And then you get into your 20s and then you get into your 30s and you're kind of like, so the getting over it part isn't happening quite so quickly. And then your 40s and then your 50s. And you start to realize that you've really got to take care of yourself, both your mind and your body. I love snowboarding, and I have a 19-year-old daughter, and she's been snowboarding. She's been skiing since she was 3 or 4, but she kind of got the bug for snowboarding probably around 9 or 10 years old. And now we've gotten to this point where she's been doing it for a decade. I've been doing it with her. And I remember this was a couple of weeks ago, closing out the season together. And I remember just riding up the lift with her, and here's my kids sitting next to me on this chair. We've been doing this thing together for a decade at that point. And as we get off, we sort of buckle up and start to fly down. And I'm watching her side to side as we're kind of like going with each other. And I'm just thinking to myself that this, like, I don't want this moment to end. I don't want it to end. And what a blessing it is, that I'm able to do this, to share this amazing passion with this person in my life who I just adore so much. But there's another side to this, which is, we love doing this exercise, this movement together. And at the same time, it is the type of activity that can really take a toll on your body. So you're constantly trying to figure out, okay, I'm asking myself the question, if I want to be able to do this for as long as humanly possible, like I'm 55 now, 60, 65, 70, 75, maybe 80. Like, can you imagine like me out there on the mountain with my daughter who would, like be in her 30s or whatever it is. And we're still just kind of rolling side by side. How do I take care of myself in a level that would allow me to access that level of wellness, both of mind and of body? I know all of these things, and I'm not doing a lot of them. I was getting headaches and I was wondering what was happening, and I wasn't paying attention. And they just kept getting worse and worse and more frequent. I went and I was looking for a solution, and I'm looking for the supplements, and I'm taking all the preventative stuff, and I'm taking all the vitamins and the nutrients and minerals. And then I go to I find the local functional medicine doc, which I'm a big believer in. I go in there and we're going through like a 2-hour intake and trying to figure out what's happening in your body here. Like, where's the inflammation? Where's this? Where's this? And nothing's helping. There was one thing that I discovered that was at the root of it. And when I made one simple change, everything changed. The wake-up call for me was this. This is actually a guitar that I built with my own hands 3 years ago. And I take really good care of it. And the reason is because I love it. I built it with my own hands. You can see my name like actually on the inside in there, which is kind of a fun thing. I love the whole back. So when we came out here, people told me, it's really dry there. And the thing about guitars, which is kind of fascinating, is that you don't really know to look for this, is that I'll show you the back of it here. And if I kind of hold it up like that, you'll start to see there's a little bit of a rounding in the back, and on the front, there's a little bit of a dish that happens with it. And what happens is, if there's no moisture in the air where this instrument is, that dish, all the moisture gets sucked out of the wood and it starts to go flat like this. And it's incredibly stressful for the wood and for the guitar. And if it happens on the top part of the guitar, the bridge where the strings come into literally gets pulled down, and the strings all start to sit against all of the frets, and you can't play it. So I'm hanging out here like racked with headaches, and my guitar is in a case, sealed, hermetically sealed in the hard case. I have this device right here. I have a hygrometer in the case to measure how much moisture there is in the air in the case to make sure it doesn't get damaged. So one day I'm sitting here and I just open up the case and I pull out my guitar to play it. And I'm like, well, it's got to be in good shape because it's sealed, it's inside. And I try and play, and it's not playable because the strings are sitting right on top of the frets. And I realized that even inside of a sealed case where I'm measuring the moisture in it, the air at a mile high of altitude is so stunningly dry. It's so stunningly devoid of moisture that it literally sucked the moisture through the rubber seals on the case out of the wood and the guitar and made it unplayable. And that was this odd light bulb moment for me, because I'm thinking to myself, okay, if it is so dehydrated here in my environment that it did this to an inert piece of wood, what's that doing to me? And I'm thinking, we've been talking about inflammation and movement and nutrition and all this. Nobody ever actually wondered whether I'm just massively dehydrated, whether I'm like my guitar. And I've done enough study and research on proper hydration in the body that I know what it tells you. And one of the really big things that happens when you're massively dehydrated is you get headaches. And it all clicked for me. I started drinking water, and it was like a miracle. So this is like, it's funny because oftentimes I think when we talk about wellness, especially advanced wellness, we're looking for the hacks and the miraculous things and the technology. And I use and have all of that stuff. And those are the optimizers. Those are the tweaks, right? Those are the extra like 0.5 to 1% better things. But so often, when we really want to look at what are the things that move the needle in a giant way, it takes us back to the basics. So for me, this basic was water. So I changed my water habits, my hydration habits. So I wake up in the morning, actually before I go to bed at night, I pour a cup of water, 12 ounces of water. I leave it next to my bed. The first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I meditate. And then as soon as I meditate, I drink 12 cups of water. And then I start drinking all day long. Within 48 hours, my headaches had almost entirely vanished. And when you think about wellness, one of the fundamental things that we tend to never think about is the notion of proper hydration. It was brought to my attention because I'm in a bit of an extreme environment at altitude. I'm a foot high. Next week, we'll be filming even higher in the mountains at 10,000 feet. And I've been at varying levels here. What we don't realize, though, is you don't actually have to be at altitude for hydration to have a really powerful negative effect on your body, or dehydration. Because when we breathe every single day, we exhale moisture from our body. And a lot of us aren't really thinking about that. We think, well, what do we learn in biology class in high school? Well, we inhale oxygen and we exhale CO2. The other thing that we exhale is H2O, is water. And in fact, the more we exhale, the more water leaves our body. And the drier the outside environment is, the lower the humidity in the air is, the more it leaves our body and doesn't come back in. It doesn't recoat the lungs. It doesn't get absorbed. If you exercise on a regular basis, if you go walking on a regular basis, that's fantastic. Do it, do it, do it. At the same time, when you move your body, your heart rate elevates. When your heart rate elevates, the data shows us the rate of moisture leaving your body goes up dramatically. So I want to share this with you because it's this aspect of wellness that we often don't think about. There's like throwaway lines on the internet, drink your 8 glasses of water, which like the research is showing is completely different for most people now. But I wanted to, what's the thing that we all hate in our inboxes now when somebody sort of like keeps emailing you and they email you and say, I'm going to bump this to the top of your inbox. I want to bump this to the top of your brain box right now because it's been in there for probably your whole life. But we haven't really paid much attention to it. We're looking for all the other more involved things, more complicated things. But this is so, so, so critically important, to the point where a simple change has made a profound difference in my daily experience of life in terms of the amount of pain that I'm in on a day-to-day basis. And now it's just a part of my habit, and it has made a huge difference. In the real world, confidence is very often unavailable at the moments where you have to make the biggest decisions, and there is no way to actually get it. What we started thinking about here is the fact that it's not about confidence in real life, nor do you want it to be about confidence. It's about the opportunity to be changed by a moment or an experience. Because the truth is, in the real world, the only way to be 100% confident about anything is if you've already done it, or if someone else has already done it. And at that point, confidence doesn't really matter, because when you're 100% confident that it will work and you will succeed, you have simultaneously reduced the stakes to a point where you won't care even if you succeed. It just doesn't matter anymore. So I'm going to propose to you that it's actually not about confidence. That's really not what we're going for here, right? I'm going to propose an alternative frame to you. And that's that it's the moments you're not confident, but find a way to do it anyway, that hold the greatest opportunity for growth. So rather than us trying to figure out how can I get confident? How can I do the things that will make me feel 100% confident? How can I gather the facts or the skills and the information? The things that matter the most, the places where the stakes are the highest, and the opportunity for growth and success and amazement and awe and connection and serendipity and impact and purpose and meaning, those experiences, those interactions, those moments, those endeavors and pursuits, guess what? You will never have anywhere close to 100% confidence in your own ability to pull it off, or in the world rallying to support it or you. But you got to find a way to act anyway, because those are the windows. Those are the moments. Those are the seasons of our life when we don't know, but somehow we still act. And when we actually can find a way through, when we keep making decisions and taking actions and keep stepping forward and forward and forward, even when our head is spinning and the world is uncertain and we have very little confidence, we just don't know if it's going to work or not. When we find the ability to do that, and then we progress through it and we take baby steps towards this vision that we have, that is the most magical place to be. It's not even the achievement of the end state that really fuels us up and lights us up. It's the process. It's the process of growing. It's the process of putting yourself in a place where you have the opportunity to be changed by the experience. And if you are 100% confident that you can do it and that the universe will support it and there's no way to fail, it doesn't matter to you anymore. What you have effectively done is made yourself comfortable, but eliminated the opportunity to experience growth. I'm going to suggest something different here. Instead of pursuing confidence, what I'm going to suggest is that we take a different approach, that we cultivate unconfident action meta skills, that we actually intentionally put ourselves in a place on a regular basis where we go out into the world and we don't know how it's going to end, where there's no easy way to have confidence that this is going to work or we will be able to pull it off and still be okay there, because that is the fertile ground of life. So let's talk about some of these skills, okay? I call these the ABCs. The first one is awareness and ease. What I'm talking about here is the ability to see clearly and find peace in the space of groundlessness. So that's really kind of two things, but the practices are related. We want to know that we're looking out into the horizon and we can see as clearly and truthfully as possible, and also looking internally and understanding what is my internal state? How clear can I get about that? I want to become aware of the internal and external states, because that is one of the things that will allow me to make effective decisions rather than spinning all sorts of anxiety-based or doom-based projections, right? We want to become aware, and we want to cultivate the practices that will let us feel a sense of ease. The second one is bravery. And what I'm talking about when I talk about bravery is a willingness to act even when you don't know if it will work. And the third thing, right, this is the C here, is conviction. And when I'm talking about conviction, I'm talking about a deep knowing around why it matters and what the stakes are. So those are what I call the ABCs of cultivating action in the face of unconfidence. Let's start with conviction. So when I talk about conviction here, what I'm really talking about is to ask the why question 5 to 10 times, and then we're going to step away from it, ask it again, and journal. Now, why is this so important in the context of us doing things, knowing that no matter how much we try, there is no one moment where if the stakes are high and we haven't already done it before, that we will ever be 100% confident. So it can be these tiny little moments, or it could be launching something huge into the world or starting a new career. When we do that, we're taking a risk and we're going to stumble along the way. And the bigger it is, the more complex it is, the longer the time frame, the more likely it is that we are going to keep meeting barrier after barrier after barrier. When that happens, one of the things that allows us to continue to take steps and make decisions is understanding why we said yes to it in the first place. But very often, when we ask ourselves, well, why does this matter to me? We come up with a superficial answer at first. And then if we keep drilling down though, but why does that answer matter to me? And then why does that answer matter to me? And then why does that answer matter to me? So if I'm going to move from one place to an entirely different state or country, I could say, well, I'm moving from New York to Colorado, for example. And I would say, well, there's a lot of risk involved in that. I'm not confident in myself that I'll be able to handle the move and work effectively and be okay. And I don't, but I still have to take some action. And I would say to myself, well, why would it matter to me to be there? Well, because, I love the outdoors and, there's snowboarding nearby and, okay, but why does that matter to me? Well, because there's something about the outdoors. And when I'm snowboarding on a mountain that changes the way that I feel. Okay. And why does that matter to me? Well, because as you get deeper into life, very often, you become more attuned to the passage of time. And I am attuned to that. And I want to know that in whatever time I have on this planet, I'm doing things that allow me to feel connected and alive. And then you keep going like that 2 more times until you get to a place where you get the most authentic answer. And here's what you do then. Instead of writing it down saying, I'm done, you walk away, because the real juice happens after you do that. Because you take a pause, but your brain does not. Your subconscious brain keeps running the script, running the question over and over and over. You don't even realize it. And then 3 days later, you're walking down the street and your brain says, this is the real reason why. And when you get that, you write it down, you write about it, you reflect on it, you journal it, and you put it in print, not by typing it into a computer, but by literally writing it with your hands. It's because it changes the brain. It wires it differently when you memorialize things that way. So you write it down. And this is so important, because when you start to stumble, when you hit roadblocks, when things happen that keep you questioning, what happens is when you can revisit the deepest why, it gives you the sense of conviction. It says, oh, this is why this mattered to me. This is what the stakes are. And I care deeply about these stakes. So even though I don't know if I'm going to succeed, I'm not really confident in my ability to pull this off, and I don't know what's going to happen, I'm going to keep taking action because it really, really matters to me.
This can be your day for personal growth. This can be that day you committed to and you remember and you go, that was the day I got myself a community. I got better coaches. I committed to making my life the absolute best that I could. This is that day. Make today your growth day. Click the button on this page and sign up right now.